deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very special broadcast of the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com. Want to give a big, huge shout out to all of our regular listeners out there on the TFR website. I see the chat room filling up nicely. Got a really, really special show lined up to start the week off today. And not only that, but I have got my good friend with me, Mr. Charlie Robinson. So it's always going to be a good show when I've got Charlie here, because Charlie, like myself, he likes to deliver really, really bad and dark news with a bit of comedy. And I think in the times that we're living right now, I think that's truly essential that we're able to keep a smile on our face, because things are just going from crazier to more insane to batshit crazy. And it's all going worse and worse and worse as each day and as each week passes by. So for anyone out there who doesn't know who Charlie is, well, Charlie is the author of The Octopus of Global Control. Now, what's that, I hear you asking? Well, it's a controversial and hilarious book that features the opinions of over 500 experts that expose and explain the century-long plan for world domination by the global elite. He had a front-row seat to the fraud and the corruption in the mortgage industry during his 10-year career in Las Vegas real estate, and he credits John Perkins' book Confessions of an Economic Hitman as the final piece of the puzzle that helped him to really see how the American government operates. Charlie's an entrepreneur with a marketing degree from the University of Southern California and agrees with the brilliant comedian, the late Bill Hicks, that everyone in marketing should kill themselves. And that always brings a smile to my face every single time that I read it. So without wasting any more time today, Charlie Robinson, welcome to the show, my friend.
We are going to have to change that to everybody in marketing should check themselves into MCC in New York City.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like the place to spend some time, Charlie. You know, nothing ever goes wrong there, right?
Kill yourself, yes.
Yeah, big time.
What's happening? Since last time we talked, it was all about Epstein's AI robots. And did we have a little news since then?
Well, it seems like something might have happened. I'd hate to say that we told people so, but certainly there's been a lot of big news on that front, isn't there?
Yeah, that was that was not a difficult one to see coming. It was pretty obvious. Well, I guess that's what you get when you cross some very powerful people and you have a lot of information. We've talked about this before, how you never, if you've got the goods on somebody, you never pre-announce it. You don't say, I'm going to say this or this or this at some point in the future. You either never mention it or you say it, everything that's on that you've got immediately. But if you do that thing where you hedge and you say, I'm going to drip a little bit out here and a little bit out later, you will wind up going canoeing during dinner and never coming back, or you will wind up going for a swim off of the back of Lady Ghislaine and never coming back, or you will check yourself into MCC and die from strangulation, even though it's impossible to kill yourself. But if you do these things and you try and tease that you've got the goods on someone, that is the worst possible strategy you could ever employ to trying to protect yourself, because all it does is put a big fat target on you, and it says to the people in power, you better get this guy killed as fast as possible, because the longer he sticks around, the longer there's a chance that he'll talk. So
absolutely,
Epstein's got to know. He knew. obviously nobody's feeling bad for him because he's a reprehensible human being, but also on top of all of that, like, look, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it. How'd you think this was going to end? With you on your island getting massages from girls for the rest of your life? I mean, at some point, he was going to cross somebody. He was going to cross some Russian oligarch, or he was going to cross some Mossad hitman, or somebody was going to put a couple bullets in his head, or, you know, arrange for him to kill himself in, you know, in a facility where you're not supposed to, where nobody in 40 years has ever killed themselves. So, you know,
where Harry
this is what you
Houdini,
get.
not even Harry Houdini could have done himself in that cell. I'm telling you, dude.
No.
But listen, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that as the show progresses. We've got lots. You've given me a lot of images we can get to as well. But I know there's something else that caught your attention, and you really alerted me to it yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's something we've spoke about in the past, Charlie, but it's something that everyone out there listening today really needs to get a handle on, because social credit scoring, surveillance, China, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I was even hearing today, Charlie, it's now got to the point in China where people are now literally scared to leave the house. And they're scared to leave the house because they know that it could incur fines, they could get into trouble, and they're absolutely guaranteed to be stopped and searched by police multiple times. You've been looking into this more, Charlie. Talk to us about China, what's going on there, and why we should all pay attention to what is the country canary in the coal mine, so to speak.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And let's make a distinction between Hong Kong and mainland China. I've been to both. I've been to Hong Kong a couple times. I've been to mainland China as well. Apples and oranges. Okay. I mean, there's more people that speak English in Hong Kong than speak English in Los Angeles, right? So it's a very different place. And we're not talking about the protests that are going on there, although we could. But what we're talking about is the Orwell on steroids surveillance system that is not planned for the future of mainland China. It's there now. This is not some futuristic view of what society could turn into, Minority Report, 1984 or anything like that. It's here. It's already happening. They're living it right now. If you want to see what repression looks like, if you want to see what self-censorship looks like, if you want to see what overt censorship looks like, you don't need to go get in your time machine or your DeLorean and set it for 30 years from now. All you need to do is get on a flight to Shenzhen, and you will see that what they have going on there is a dystopian nightmare that is literally on par with the Terminator movie that we saw, 30 years ago, where robots are controlling things, and if they're looking for you, that it's easy to find. I watched a video even just last night, a documentary. I forget who did it. It was either Al Jazeera or BBC, and it was they took a white guy, one of the white reporters, and he said, "I want to test something." He was working with the local Chinese government, and he said, "I just want to test something." So they took his picture and they put it in the system as somebody that is wanted. And he then walked out of that facility and just headed to the train station. And his goal was to see how long it would take before the police apprehended him. And it took 7 minutes before they got him. So the facial recognition cameras in China are everywhere. They've sold 200 million of them. We're not talking about just traditional surveillance cameras. Those are even more so. We're talking about the high-tech facial recognition cameras, which of course they make in China in general, in Shenzhen in particular. So they've developed this system where, like you were talking about, people are afraid to get up and walk outside of their house for fear that they'll be fined or something will go wrong. So you have a social credit system. And this is like everything feeds into this. You've got your facial recognition component. You've got your ID passport, or the Chinese equivalent of their passport. I don't know if it's necessarily for international travel or just for local travel, but that's tied into it. It's directly tied to their bank accounts. It's tied to their employers, and it's tied to their any sort of credit card system. There's not a whole lot of credit card usage in China, surprisingly. They do mostly through QR codes. which is really weird. So everything is sort of the transactions handled by your phone. If you want to buy milk, you scan the QR code for the milk and you grab it. It's deducted automatically from your online account, sort of like a Venmo account, an online digital purchasing place. Now, there's two companies that manage those QR code purchase apps. Both of them have partnerships with the government. So the government has the ability, whenever they choose, to go into those companies' databases and see who bought what, whenever they want to. That's the deal. So you have zero transparency with regard to your finances there. So you go, so part of what you buy feeds into your social credit system too. If you buy too much alcohol, your score goes down. If you buy too much junk food, your score goes down. If you got caught smoking on a train, your score goes down. And the reason why they know you're smoking on a train is because there's cameras throughout the train. So they match it to your facial recognition system. And if you're caught smoking on a train, they fine you. There's not a police officer that comes and gives you a ticket. They don't take you to court where you have a court date to fight the court. They automatically deduct it from your account.
And not only
so
that,
the fine
Charlie,
is paid.
you've got trusted citizens as well who will
Yes.
go about their local neighborhood and add that extra layer of physical surveillance on top of the CCTV and everything else. And they're looking at your garden, is it tidy? And even the AI in the cameras I was hearing today, it alerts the police anytime somebody's walking too fast. And you might think to yourself, well, that's going to be a bit hard for the police to manage all of that. It would have been until they started popping up police stations on every single corner in every major single city.
And that's no exaggeration. They have police stations every couple hundred yards there. It is a full-blown lockdown surveillance grid. Everything you say, do is recorded. And it's got a little North Korea to it as well, like you said, with the trusted citizens and the people that are sort of walking around. I mean, in the United States, we call them rats, right? That's
exactly.
You're a rat. You do that stuff in prison, you'll get Epstein, But in China, it's like, if you've seen the series on Amazon, The Man in the High Castle, there's a lot of that
brilliant,
in that
dude.
as well.
I love that show. Yeah,
love
absolutely.
it too. But in the Japanese controlled section, if you're doing the wrong thing, everyone's kind of watching, and they, and of course, and North Korea is sort of legendary for their triple generation punishment system, where if I live in North Korea and I do something against the government that's wrong, and they take me and put me in their work camp, they also take my family, one generation above and one generation below as well. And that's how you scare the hell out of people. And China is incorporating aspects of that as well. So if you buy too many video games, your score goes down. If you criticize the government, your score goes down. If you visit the wrong website, your score goes down. If you pick up the phone and call somebody who has a low score, your score goes down because they have a low score. If you have friends with low scores, your score goes down. If you post something on social media that goes against the system, your score goes down. If you go to the grocery store though and you buy healthy food, your score goes up. If you buy toilet paper and plastic trash bags, your score goes up because it shows you're more responsible. So it is crazy Orwellian, nightmarish scenario disguised as, if you're doing the right thing, you have nothing to worry about. That sort of, adage that we've had for the last 70 years, which, comes out of the mouth of bootlickers. But the rest of us just look at it and go, who's buying that? Because that's straight propaganda. But that's what's going on in China.
Oh, big time. And somebody in the chat room, it's Tori. And of course, we've got two chat rooms tonight, folks, because we're both here on TFR, the home of the Kev Baker Show. And we're simulcasting to YouTube as well. And Tori says, it's a bit like Persons of Interest. I don't know if you've seen that TV show, Charlie. I would say it's 100 times worse than
Minority Report too.
Yeah,
it's
because
like that, where they're looking at pre-crime and they're looking at your history. Now the thing about archiving everybody's activities is that you might not be doing anything wrong necessarily, but over a long enough timeline, if somebody wants to find some dirt on you or find something that you've done wrong, they just retroactively go back through your past until they find it. And then how would I know this? Because I'm in Facebook jail again for the third time. And the reason I'm in Facebook jail again is because they retroactively looked at a post from 2017 and put me in Facebook jail for that. So it didn't violate terms of their community standards in 2017, but it does today. And so therefore they then go back through my history, find it, and then give me a 30-day ban. And then 2 days later, they gave me another 30-day ban. I mean, this is the third time I've gotten it for posts from 2017. I must have been doing a lot of complaining in 2017, but they
telling a lot of truth, Charlie. That's what you were doing.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it's all about the same topic. It's clearly a topic that Facebook doesn't like, and I'm not going to say it here, but it's a school that doesn't exist anymore. Wink, wink.
Yes.
Got bulldozed. Yeah. So this is, I'm getting a taste of it. And to me, it's just annoying, right? 30-day ban. Okay, fine. I can't comment I can get on Facebook, but I can't comment. I've had this before. It's just annoying more than anything. But, in China, in the month of July, they prevented 2.56 million discredited entities, is what they call them, from buying plane tickets. So a discredited entity is somebody with a low credit score. So just in the month of July, I'm not talking about all of 2018, and I'm not talking about so far in 2019. I'm just talking about the last month. You've got 2.56 million discredited entities were not allowed to travel through on a plane, and another 90,000 were not allowed to buy high-speed rail tickets just because their scores were low, And there you go. You've got that. You've got that article up now. This is what, unless you think it's just criticizing the government that'll get your score to be lower. If you walk your dog without a leash, your score goes down, right? So this is like, you mentioned how people would walk out, be afraid to go outside of their house for fear that, can you blame them? I mean, you don't know what's going to do it. Even if somebody doesn't see you with a camera, what if your neighbor rats you out for that? Oh, he didn't pick up his dog poop. I mean, we all kind of want to do that, on some level. When you see your neighbors doing that, you're kind of annoyed with it. But think of like calling the KGB or the NKVD or the North Korean secret police to like rat on your like, my neighbor didn't pick up his dog poop, and then the police show up and like take them down to the station. Like this is what's going on in China. It's no exaggeration. They are they're after people. So in the United States, there's a lot of demonization aimed at China, and part of that just seems like bluster, trade wars, tariffs, things like that. Why are they building on these islands in the East China Sea and all these threats? And Americans, I don't think, really take it seriously, and I don't think they find that many social connections with the Chinese people. But I think if they knew this about the social credit score system, I think they would have a little bit more empathy for what's going on in China, and that that country, for all the great things it's doing as far as manufacturing, it's still an authoritarian regime. I mean, you don't kid yourself. Like I said, I've been to Shanghai before. It's a very strange place. I didn't feel unsafe, but it's a little bit like, I felt a little bit like Total Recall when the lady was going through, when Arnold Schwarzenegger dressed like the lady going through the security system, 2 weeks, and it pulls the head off. I felt like that in when I was going through the airport in Shanghai, because they were testing it. They had these big radar systems set up that were pointed at everybody with guards standing around them. And what they were doing is they were checking everybody's body temperature as they came through the airport, because if your body temperature was too high, they thought that you would have the bird flu. And if you had bird flu because your temperature was too high, they quarantine you for a month. And I remember going from Shanghai to Hong Kong through the airport, and I had a fever. I was feeling sick. Like I just didn't feel good. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to put me in a cage for sure. And I was thinking like Total Recall, like maybe I should just like wrap a wet towel around my head and try and go through security. I was legitimately freaked out. This was 2005. And I'm sure that the technology obviously has gotten much better.
Well, that's what I was listening to today, and I think it was maybe a link you'd sent me, but they're describing this as like China being a laboratory for all new surveillance technology.
Oh,
Now, for
yeah.
people out there, they might think, well, I'm never going to China. Doesn't affect me. Don't worry about it, Kev. Don't worry about it, Charlie. You're just kind of
Yep.
like panicking for nothing. Well, I live in the UK's first smart city. And very soon we're all going to be living in smart cities. They're all going to be connected. And this surveillance is a huge aspect of that, Charlie. The one goes hand in hand with the other for me. We're just seeing our system being built up just now, and we're going to cherry pick all of the good stuff, all of the high-tech surveillance kit that's been tried out over in China, and it's going to be rolled out here. Just today I was hearing about a police department in America. They've taken delivery of these new night scope robots that go out into the street, and they're basically conducting pre-crime because they're looking at facial recognition, they're looking at criminal records, they're looking at driving logs, and then they're assigning basically a threat factor to people just walking by it in the street. So for anyone out there who thinks this is just China, don't worry about it, guys. I've got news for you. It's coming over here, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's already been exported to some countries. We were talking about Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins and how they would enslave a country like Ecuador with large loan packages from the IMF and World Bank in order to install a giant hydroelectric power plant or something like that. Well, ironically, one of the first countries that China exported this technology to was also Ecuador. And what they did was they said to Ecuador, we'll buy your oil. We China will buy your oil at this fixed price. But one of the things we want is we want you to buy our surveillance system for your people in Ecuador. And we realize it's expensive. So what we'll do is we'll arrange for a big loan for you to finance this, much like the IMF and World Bank did and John Perkins did as an economic hitman. So here we go again, about 50 years later, with Ecuador once more getting suckered into these deals. And it's easy to know how it happens. They take the people at the very top, they give them a ton of money, they say you'll be excluded from this, it's no big deal, we'll hook you up, but this is what we need in exchange. And so in Ecuador, it's already there. The facial recognition systems, the cameras are there, and they're already locking people up for crimes that are crimes like crossing the street. Same thing in China. If you cross the street, if you illegally cross the street, you jaywalk across the street, in some cases an alarm, a auditory alarm will go off with a voice saying you are illegally crossing the street, please return to the side of the street. And if you continue across the street, by the time you get on the sidewalk and you walk half a block down, you will have been fined for jaywalking. You will have a ticket, and it will already be deducted from your account, that same account that you use with your cell phone and the QR code. So there's no judge and jury. You're just boom, you're guilty. And Ecuador's rolling this out as well, and so they're starting to have problems with it. And China, of course, is leading
gone.
the way on this. So if we think that it's
gone.
not coming, it's coming. It's already in certain countries, and it's coming to everyone soon.
And Charlie's going to get into some preventative kind of measures that we can take after the break. But I was watching this clip again today, Charlie, and we've got a real problem with knife crime over here right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was seeing in China, if you want to buy a knife, it's a whole rigmarole. They assign your kind of national ID that's linked to the purchase you're making. And not only that, but they put a QR code on the actual blade of the knife so that
Correct.
if it's ever found, they can link it right back to you.
That's right. It's they love their QR codes there. They haven't really caught on as much here. I don't know about the UK. I didn't remember seeing them. But in China,
not
they're
really.
everywhere.
Yeah, not big here yet, but it'll come. It'll get to that stage. You know that.
Oh, of course. Yeah, they just show in that video of a nice, a nice knife. We're not talking like a Rambo style knife. We're talking about the type of, a nice knife you'd have in your kitchen for slicing meat or something. And they print they put it under some sort of scanner, and boom, they laser print on a QR code, and that knife now belongs to you. I mean, they don't even do this in prisons. You know, I mean, in prisons, they just have like the big board and all the knives. They have the outline of the knife. And if it's one's missing, then you see which one's missing. Like China's like, forget that, man. We've got QR codes. We'll show you how to keep track of everything.
Now we're coming
and
up we're coming up on the break, Charlie. We're coming up on the break. So if people want to visit your website, it's the octopusofglobalcontrol.com. That's the octopusofglobalcontrol, all one word, .com. Charlie's also on Facebook when he's not in jail, and Twitter as well. We'll be right back. Okay, there we go now. Charlie, obviously, it's not like it usually is. We like to sit here and we abuse everyone in the world, but we're still live on YouTube. So a big shout out to everyone in YouTube out there. Kristen is manning. Well, can I say manning? Is that like assigning gender? Are we allowed to do that?
Don't you assign a gender to
she's
poor Kristen.
personaging the chat. Do you like how I've done that? She's just personing the chat. But we've got James Higgins in there, Kristen, Armand, Holly, Nana, Amanda. We have got my good friend War. We've got Holly, Janine, so many people, Chris Bova. So I hope you're enjoying the show so far. And if we do get any super chats coming in, you won't hear them on the screen tonight because obviously we're going out live on TFR as well. But myself and Charlie will answer any of them or deal with any of them during the breaks. So yeah, Charlie, this social credit scoring system, dude, it's frightening. It truly is frightening. I've heard rumors about how if you are in debt as well, you're basically named and shamed to people in your own neighborhood. I mean, this is getting ridiculous. And the point being, you know, it's almost like boiling frogs because none of us have really, I mean, we've spoke about it time and time again. People have seen it coming, but nobody seems to be getting very concerned about it. Is it just us? Are we mad?
No, I mean, that's how you, if you're an authoritarian psychopath looking to implement this sort of control grid, you would do that very slowly. You would slowly turn the heat up. Because if you just went to this right away, of course, it would never fly. And in the United States, we also have to sort of trick everybody into getting on board with these programs. So eventually what will happen is somebody will do something, commit a crime, a false flag or something with a gun. And they'll say, you know what we really need? Or leave his gun at the crime scene and they can't catch him. They'll say, well, if we'd only had QR codes printed on the guns, then we'd know exactly whose gun this was, which of course doesn't make any sense and wouldn't work. But that's how it'll be sold. And then you'll start to have people saying, we want QR codes on the gun, you know, and they'll protest that. And you're like, well, you know, so they'll manufacture a reason.
Here's the thing about criminals, right? You tend to find criminals don't really respect the law.
No, so they don't love it.
They get round things like that. And I can tell you, for a country that's got some of the most draconian gun laws ever, people still get their hands on guns over here. Yeah. You know, in Glasgow, biggest city in Scotland, I think the last time I heard it was something like £500. You can get yourself a gun. I'm not condoning, I'm not saying that's a good thing, go and get yourself a gun, but my point being, gun bans, measures taken, you're dealing with criminals, folks. You're dealing with criminals that don't respect the law, so it's crazy.
Well, in the United States, what they did is they made drugs illegal, and then everybody stopped doing them. So,
dude,
you know,
the world's gone mad. It really has. I'm just glad I've got somebody like you by my side because we tend to look at things with a bit of humor. And I know it annoys some people, but dearie me, if you can't laugh about what's going on right now, then whoa, I really feel for you.
I realize the seriousness of this all, but still, we have to have a little bit of a laugh because it's such madness. It's one of the best ways to get the point across too. I feel. Yeah. I like the way Jon Stewart did that.
Now we're going to bring back TFR in just a second. And there's something about your Skype, Charlie, that glitches everything because we got the blue screen of death again when we started the show. So when I add in the network, there's a chance, folks, that things might go a bit weird. But that's okay because, you know, I'm the king of weird. I'm a weird guy and I roll with weird.
Weird too.
So we will fix things on the fly. So I'm just waiting for TFR to say that we're live again. And 3, 2, 1. Keep your fingers crossed, folks. It all works well. There we go. We are back. We are live. Just like that. Charlie Robinson. absolutely amazing researcher and the author of The Octopus of Global Control. And this is the book that you really do need if you're wanting to attempt to wake up the hardest people on earth. Who's the hardest people on earth to wake up? Well, if you've ever tried speaking to family members, they tend to be some of the most stubborn, and they're usually the last ones to kind of get where you're coming from. But with a book like Charlie's, and I'm not just saying this, folks, this is armed with facts, and it's not Charlie saying these things. It's the elites in their own quotes are telling you about not only the octopus of global control, but how it all works. So, Charlie, let's get back into this. How can we fight back against the persons of interest, HAL, AI? I don't know what to call the system they're building out, dude. I said to you before the show, Mel and Aaron Dykes, really good friends. Mm-hmm. And one time I had them on, they started talking about this thing called idiocracy. And I'm sitting thinking, right, I should really pretend I know what this is while we're on air. But then when I got off air, I'm like, what is that you're talking about? So it's this movie, right? And it's a comical take on just how wild and weird things can get. And I tell you what, the more time goes on, the more that's stopping to look like a comedy. And it's starting to look like a factual documentary, dude.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's written by Mike Judge, who did Beavis and Butthead and Office Space. And it's got Luke Wilson in it. And the premise is that he's working at some like military facility. He's a janitor. He's just kind of a big dummy. And he goes inside this chamber, and it accidentally closes, and it puts him to sleep, and sort of like a hibernation chamber. And it's set to open up 500 years in the future. So 500 years go by, it opens up, and he comes out, and it turns out that he's now the smartest man in the world. But before, he was just like a regular guy who was just kind of sweeping up, and he wasn't really doing much of anything. But then it just goes on to show him how he has to navigate the world. And then the president of the United States is President Camacho, which is Terry Crews. Terry Crews has this big long wig, and halfway through his State of the Union address, everyone starts heckling him. So he reaches under the podium and grabs a machine gun, starts firing up in the air, and all the idiots, start chanting like they're, like a bunch of gorillas, and everybody drinks Mountain Dew. I mean, it's just the greatest movie ever. But it came out in like the early 2000s, and he's now having to, do interviews. People are asking him about this movie, and he's saying, I didn't mean for it to be a documentary. I mean, I had no idea. And so, so we're kind of goofing about that. And I emailed you last night, hey, Kev, I got a great business opportunity for you. If you want to make some real money, we should get into the anti-surveillance clothing industry, because what's going on in China is that people that don't like these facial recognition cameras following them around, and of course there's a vast population of sheep that are totally fine with it, or they're not going to rock the boat. But as you would expect, there is a small percentage that are not okay with it. And one of the things that they've done is this guy has created a line of clothing that has license plates all over it, small little license plates. And what it does is it screws with the license plate readers all around town. It messes with the facial recognition cameras too. They think they're looking at cars, so people will wear these T-shirts or jackets or hats or all of them and go out in public because it confuses the cameras and it throws them off their scent a little bit. So I thought that was, I think it's funny. I think it's crazy that we have to think about stuff like that, but
you're right. This is a really good business opportunity for somebody.
It's going to get,
my only worry is,
industry.
my only worry is, especially here in the UK, I would imagine that before too long, there'll be legislation made, some act passed through Parliament where if you are caught trying to hide from the cameras or to disrupt the camera system, I think because you're in a public space, I think that might result in a fine. That's just my own thinking around this, Charlie. What do you think, though?
I would agree with you. And I would say that I would refer everybody to the last chapter in my book, which is called Now What Do We Do? or So Now What is the chapter. And I would remind everybody that we still have another option, and that is non-compliance. If they're going to fine you for that, you just say, then you fine me. I'm wearing it. Everybody wears it. Nobody complies. It's amazing what happens when everybody makes up their mind that they're tired of this, that they're not having it anymore. They can't do anything about that.
And we
They
have
really
to,
can't.
we have to get to that point, Charlie, because again, it's like the boiling frogs. It's just going to continue, and they're going to continue turning the heat up until
Yeah.
this system is in place. And once it's in place, it's going to be a mighty thing to roll back, dude. So people
Yeah.
really need to start talking out now if we're to have
Yeah.
any hope.
For sure. You need to make it so unpopular to enforce these laws, these new unjust laws that are coming up. If you have family members that are in the police force, you should shame them into not enforcing these ridiculous laws. You should say, how dare you go around giving people tickets for wearing this shirt, a shirt like that, or how dare you do? I mean, we're too polite sometimes, to be honest with you, as a society. We all want to kind of go along, get along. We don't want people bothering us, but we need to speak up. We need to say, we're not tolerating this. You know what? You know who's doing a pretty good job of that? How about the people in Hong Kong? How about the people in Paris? They are still pissed, and they are still out in the streets. And guess what? They're making the people in positions of power very, very nervous. Now, I understand that the situation in Hong Kong has the U.S.'s tentacles all over it. Okay, they're using the people of Hong Kong as a proxy, but the people in Hong Kong have the legitimate complaints against the Chinese government. I know it's backed by the U.S. I understand that. I'm not ignorant to that fact. But they are showing the authoritarian regime in China that, hey, we're Hong Kong, we're a little bit different, we're not tolerating that. And if you think you can just do that with us the way you did it with the rest of the sheep back on the mainland, you're out of your mind. The people in Hong Kong have a real problem
Big time.
with the people in mainland China. And it's not just their authoritarian stuff, it's the fact that time and time and time again, the people from the mainland go to Hong Kong and they go to the bathroom on the floors in the shopping malls. And I'm not making this up. There's a huge problem with this happening in Hong Kong, that the mainland China people do not use the actual restrooms. They go to the bathroom next to the stores out in a mall, in an enclosed mall. I'm not kidding. You can find these articles. It's an epidemic. It's a big problem. So there's a cultural incompatibility between these two. You would say, oh, one's China, the other's China, they should mix well together. That is not the case. Just ask Taiwan how they feel about that. So
that's a good point. And I've seen the people in Hong Kong as well using the almost laser pens.
Yeah,
they're trying to get rid of it. I don't know what that does to the CCTV, but I've heard them saying that's like anti-facial recognition.
yeah,
I would imagine, that's what I love about humans. We always find a workaround. We always find some way to kind of call it a life hack, call it whatever. But I would imagine, be it the clothing, be it other disruptive technologies that may come onto the market as well. I think there will be ways to fight this. But again, that could come with penalties, because if you're caught doing that, social credit score is going to be affected, right?
Yeah, and this is nobody in the Western world, I would say, is excited about living the way that people in mainland China live. They don't know it, and most Americans have never been there, but they have an idea about it, and nobody's lining up to ask for that sort of government system. But they're going to get it whether they want it or not, because it's being exported, like we talked about earlier, and it's coming. And if people in the United States think they have problems with one side wanting to take your guns and the other side wanting to keep their guns, wait till you see a social credit system, because it is going to turn people against one another. It's going to turn friend against friend, neighbor against neighbor. It is nothing good can come from it. And it's on its way. It's just being slowly rolled out.
Hasn't Donald Trump already done that in America?
Yeah, he pretty much has.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But this will be the nail in the coffin, because think about this. If they want to turn off your ability to travel now that impacts your job, right? So if I can't get on an airplane and go out to my job, where I do go back and forth between Denver and Las Vegas. If I can't get on an airplane to go out there and do my job, then what does that mean? It means I can't do my job efficiently or effectively. So I have to then make sure that I'm able to get on an airplane. Well, how do I do that? Well, I can't be on Facebook criticizing the government, right? So now that's an overt censorship. I'm having to do that. But even if I'm not banned from traveling, but I know that there's the possibility that I could be, well, then I'll have internal self-censorship to make sure that I don't say anything, just because I don't want to take the risk of having it affect my social credit system, so that because I got to be able to get on that plane. And so this is like a carrot and the stick sort of reward system. And the people that are, just going about their business, don't have a problem with the government, to them, they're at the high end of the social credit system, which means they have the most flexible and the most freedom to travel and say things. They get discounts on if they're renting a bike, they don't have to pay a deposit because their credit score is high. If they're renting a house, they don't have to put a security deposit down. If they're doing this or that, if they want to rent a car, the rental car rates are lower for them because their score is higher. So they're tying this into financial incentives as well, not just social incentives, and not just incentives of keeping you out of jail or being allowed to get on an airplane, but they're also making it so that the prices are a little bit lower if you have a higher credit score. So that, of course, factors into it. And then they use that triple generation incentive program with your friends and families, where they say anybody that's tied to you, if your score is low, then it affects their score. So then you get peer pressure from them to keep your scores up, or that your wife says to you, hey, shut up on Facebook. Don't post anything about vaccines on there because I don't want my score going down, because I got to get on an airplane and go to my job as well. And so, this is how it works. And once you have this,
self-censorship, you mentioned, self-censorship is a big part of this, because once you start self-censoring, then whether you like to admit it or not, your behavior does over time change. And we've done it already on this show today, but I'm pretty convinced if myself and Charlie weren't trying to play Russian roulette with an algorithm here that could really scupper the channel, we would speak openly when we're with people publicly. I certainly don't self-censor myself. In fact, I would be considered very politically incorrect. But when you're on YouTube, when you're on Facebook, really you have to take part in that self-censorship, Charlie, or else you are going to be gone. And that's horrible. It's a horrible place to be,
Yeah, and self-censorship is impossible to quantify too. So there's no way to really measure the damage it does, the inactions of people. It's looking the other way. It's a tough one, because we're doing it. We're guilty of it. We already, everybody does it on some level, right? So you don't say the F word when you're in front of your friend who's got their kids with them, all right? So you know to keep it down. And that I wouldn't say is necessarily a negative form of censorship, but it's just appropriateness, right? So there's that. But then where does being appropriate, where does that end, and where does being a good little citizen sort of begin? And you have to sort of extend that line, or you have to kind of look around to make sure you're not saying something in front of the wrong person, or oh well, come I'll tell you later, I can't tell you here in front of everybody, or I can't tell you here in front of this phones, or you're kind of winking saying like, camera up there, we can't talk about this. So they spin it the way the Chinese government spins it to the people is, we keep you safer because of this, because somebody with a big knife with a QR code on it in a parking garage as you're walking out to get your car at night most likely won't try to rob you, because they know that there's cameras everywhere, right? That's sort of the thinking of it. Well, that happens, people get robbed in broad daylight all the time. We've had this, I've seen this, I've had it happen when I was a kid with my mom, watch guys come up and try to carjack us in broad daylight at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the parking lot of a mall. It doesn't prevent everybody. It prevents maybe people that are on the edge, people that don't really want to get themselves in trouble might think twice about it, but hardcore criminals, like we talked about, criminals are criminals. They don't care about the laws. You can pass as many laws as you want. You can pass gun control laws, knife control laws. They will get a screwdriver and stick it to your neck if they want to take what you've got.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean,
So,
I've worked in security, as you know, and you're so right, because CCTV, for me, it's only good after the fact. You know, when somebody's determined to do something, desperate, whatever the situation may be, they're going to do it, whether there's cameras there or not. So this whole thing about keeping you safe, definitely the party line, and some people will buy that. They'll fall for it hook, line, and sinker. However, let's take it a stage further, right? Because self-censorship, self-censorship's one thing, Charlie, but I was watching a Star Trek episode last night, right? And they go to this planet where they have banned all violent thought. You're not to have any violent thought. And what this does is it leads to a black market where people trade violent imagery telepathically. And it got me thinking, because, you know, it's self-censoring things we say right now, but we also know that with the brain chip interfaces and all the technology that they're developing right now, Facebook, Google, all the rest of them, you could go to Musk with his neural lace. They're literally going to get to the point where I do think they're going to police how we think. For
sure. I mean, but just to mention the closed circuit cameras as just a little side joke, if they worked so well, Epstein would still be alive, right?
I tell you what, the warden in the Facebook jail never goes to sleep, because I thought in the middle of the night, I thought maybe I'd be able to sneak a post in. No, the guards were all on duty. I got the message. You still have like 2 days, 23 hours and 17 minutes and 5 seconds to go, Baker.
Yeah.
Don't be posting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It never goes away.
Maybe we should get Facebook. Maybe we should get Facebook to man the MCC.
They would have put Epstein and given him 30 days for sure.
You see?
Or, you know, for having negative thoughts. So it's an interesting concept. You're talking about the Star Trek episode that there would be a black market then for violent thoughts.
Well, what happens the minute you put a prohibition on anything, Charlie? Be it guns, be it alcohol, be it drugs. It creates a black market for these things.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a really novel take, and with everything in my mind for today's show, I was thinking that this is just weird that I'm sitting watching this right now, and it ties in with where we're going as a society very rapidly. Yeah.
It's you can't. I think that these authoritarian structures need to remember that anytime you ban something, it doesn't make it go away. It never makes it go away. It just makes it go underground. It makes the price 3 times as high, and then you fill the prison. So but sometimes that's kind of the point, right? They don't. It's not. In America, with private prisons and dirty cops and the amount of money that's involved in there, sometimes the whole point is that they want to put people in prison. We have the largest prison population in the entire world, and people talk about, you know. Or Joe Scarborough says that tweet, "Oh, how very Russian of Jeffrey Epstein killing himself." No. How very American. All right. America's got the prison problem, not Russia.
I didn't even.
Joe Scarborough.
I couldn't even work out what he was trying to actually hint at. How typically Russian.
It didn't make any sense.
No.
Joe Scarborough, by the way, his intern was found dead in his office in Florida back in the 90s. So Joe Scarborough should shut up if he wants people to when he's talking about prison, because that guy should very easily have been on trial for something very shady went down, and Joe Scarborough knows that too. So how very Joe Scarborough of him.
And Mark Rubio, I think Rubio as well. I think he was another one that was hinting at the whole Russian thing. Come on, I mean, when are they going to give this up?
They can't. They are in poker. In poker, there's a term called pot committed, right? It means that you've put in enough chips that the only action that makes any sense for you at this point is to just put all your chips in, because it's past the point of no return. And for those politicians and corporate media scumbags that have been pitching the Russia thing, they're pot committed. There's no point. They can never apologize for it. They can never admit that they're wrong. The only strategy they have left is to just sell more Russia, even when it doesn't make any sense. So when you get guys like Joe Scarborough saying how very Russian, what? I mean, like, it does not, and Marco Rubio talking about how Russia is involved. Like, shut up. I mean, enough about Russia. We've talked about this before. If we want to talk about a foreign power influencing American elections, the first country that we would put at the top of the list would be Israel, not Russia. They're the ones with all the power and influence. Russia's a convenient distraction, a boogeyman created by the military-industrial complex to sell more guns and weapons and take away rights and
people didn't
and shield.
People
the real
weren't
people
buying
from
into that whole kind of the Foot Clan jumping about in Syria in black pajamas anymore. So we needed a new enemy, and Russia was it. And of course, both of us, our allegiances are known to most people. You've been on Russia today. I'm hopefully going to be going on Sputnik. And we've both had the chance to speak to people that work for Russian media. And here's the thing, folks, because guess what? These people work with absolute freedom to cover whatever story they choose. And it was Lee Stranahan I was talking to, and he said to me, Kev, this is the most refreshing kind of like company I've worked for when it comes to media, because I've even made fun of like Vladimir Putin, he said. He says nothing comes back. They don't interfere. You just get told to present the news, follow the truth, back it up by facts. Away you go.
That's when I was in London doing the show on Renegade Inc. with Ross Ashcroft that's shown on RT. Before we started rolling, he and I were chatting, and he said the same thing. He said, not one single time have I ever had anybody at RT tell me what I can and cannot say. And he said, and he had worked at the BBC before, and he said that is not the case there.
People tend to think that propaganda has to be like psyops and made up and things, but there's also the effective form of propaganda, which is telling the truth to people who are being fed bullcrap. Mm-hmm. And it works. And that's the way Russia Today and Sputnik, and I think others as well, are really approaching it. And it's refreshing, man.
Yeah, and it must sound like propaganda to somebody that is just been watching nothing but Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, or the BBC. If that's all the news you've ever watched your entire life, and then you switch on RT or Sputnik and you watch it, it probably sounds very different to you. I mean, starting with RT, I like RT a whole lot. I think that's one of the best. I think it's the best news organization out there right now on television. And you know, part of the reason why it is, and people will say, well, it's funded by the Russian government. Well, let me tell you who it's not funded by. It's not funded by the pharmaceutical industry. They don't have commercials on RT. The only commercials they run are for other RT shows or upcoming documentaries and things like that. So in the United States and in New Zealand, the only two countries in the world that allow pharmaceutical companies to advertise there, 60% of the ads that you see on television are paid for by the pharmaceutical companies. So when you turn on your nightly news expecting to get an honest debate or an honest conversation or story about how vaccines are hurting kids or how the flu shot is ineffective, you don't get that on American corporate television. And the reason why you don't get that is because there's too many ad dollars at stake that you risk alienating by going on that rant on your nightly news. So you're never going to see that. You're never going to see Anderson Cooper talk about how vaccines have paid out $4 billion in financial compensation to people that have been damaged by it. All you'll get is vaccines are safe. If you don't believe that, you're a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat wearing lunatic, and you want your kids to be hurt, and we need to ban you from Disneyland. But meanwhile, people that are actually looking at the facts of these things are realizing, well, that's not true at all. This is what happens when corporations are in charge of the news. You wind up getting stories that are slanted to fit the dictates of the corporations, because after all, they're paying the bills. They're paying, their ad dollars are keeping these companies up and running. And if you took that exemption away that allows pharmaceutical companies to advertise on the nightly news, if you took that away from CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, they'd go out of business the next week because they can't survive without that money.
You're right.
So this is part of the problem. RT and Sputnik, they don't have these sort of constraints, and it makes their news come from a source that is just a little bit more believable.
And
use your discretion.
I-
It's not to say that everything that's on there is 100% true, but what I'm saying is that it at least does not have the corporate overlords in the offices saying you can't talk about that story, you cannot do that, and that's what you get on BBC.
And I was sharing with Charlie before the show, and I wish I could remember who I heard saying this, but for anyone out there who doesn't think that the media really has an effect on how you think and how you behave, think about this. When you have a major kind of court case, a trial, the likes of Epstein should have faced, usually, normally, if it's a big enough case, high profile, lot of coverage, what happens to the jury? They're sequestered. Now, they're sequestered to keep them away from the effect that the media can have on the way that they view said crime that they're actually sitting on the jury for.
Yeah.
So if media wasn't an effective tool of shaping how you think and on from that how you behave, then there'd be no need to sequester juries. They'd be able to watch the news and get on with it, but that doesn't happen. We'll be back after the break. Don't go anywhere, folks. More from Charlie Robinson, the octopus of globalcontrol.com. There we go, Charlie. We are back, and obviously we're not alone. We've still got a couple of hundred people on YouTube here. So I want to thank everyone out there on YouTube. I'm not going to be doing this every night, but certainly when I've got somebody like Charlie on, and we've got images to look at as well as we get into the good stuff, shall we say, the algorithm unfriendly stuff, Charlie. This is where we should self-censor, but me and you being me and you, hey, the information takes precedence here and it goes out. Yeah, big time.
I know. I just can't help myself. I mean, we got to talk about these things. We got to talk about we got to talk about, I know Epstein fatigue is probably a real thing, right? People are starting to get that. But we'll keep it a little bit light when the network comes back and we're back on the radio as well. What we'll do is we'll talk. We'll fill you in on some of the funnier details of the Epstein thing, and there are some. I mean, we've got to, once again, like we've said before, we've got to take the fact that we're making light of these situations, and we're not actually making fun of child sex trafficking. It's a reprehensible and disturbing
probably the
line
most
of work,
evil,
the worst.
Yeah,
the worst.
This is. When you talk about the octopus of global control, Charlie, this is like the dark underbelly to the octopus. There's no getting away from it. You know? No,
and it's a lucrative business. It's a disturbing business, and I put this in the same category. You're talking about human trafficking, and I would talk about organ stealing, organ harvesting from people. That happens in China quite a bit. This is the guns, kids, drugs, and organs and things like that. These are real dark industries, dark web type stuff. Used to be controlled by the mob, but now we realize that they're controlled by the biggest mob of all, which is the governments.
Exactly. And I'm going to be interested to hear your take on this when we come back, because I think we kind of came from two different kind of ideas we had forming as to what the outcome of the Epstein thing was. And we'll get into that when we come back in just a moment. Yeah. But, this is, for me, this could be the most important story of a generation.
I agree.
I really do feel that, because this really does open up the closet where all the skeletons are.
Yeah. I think I mentioned it on your show before. I made this statement, and it sounds a bit hyperbolic, but I stand by it. The Epstein story has the ability to take down the United States government. It honestly does. When you dig into
the British
involved,
the highest levels of the British establishment, dude.
For sure.
Yep.
For sure.
And I think that's
get a taste.
That I think a lot of people are kind of missing that. I mean, I know a lot of the American audience will obviously focus in on people like the Clintons and whether Trump was associated, but you're talking about a high-ranking member of the royal family here, Prince Andrew. I mean, it doesn't get much higher in the British establishment than that. So we'll get into this when we come back. I'm just waiting for the go live kind of thing here.
Yeah.
So
Well, let's
hang on,
hear what
Kristen.
in the
Oh,
chat.
hang on.
What
Now,
do people
Kristen.
think of Kev's beard?
Kristen's my beard. I know Kristen likes the beard. I know a lot of people like the beard. A
I think
lot
it
of
looks
people
good,
hate the
man.
beard, man. They
I
really
think
do.
it looks good, man. I think the people that were giving you a hard time yesterday on the live stream need to.
Anne doesn't
They
like the
need to
beard.
get over it.
Anne's definitely got a problem with the beard. Don't you,
Oh,
Anne?
that's going to be a problem.
That is a problem, Charlie. That's definitely a problem. But here we go. I'm going to bring it back. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hour number 2, right here on today's Kev Baker Show on Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com. Big shout out to everyone over on YouTube as well. I've got Charlie Robinson here, the author of The Octopus of Global Control. You can find that over at The Octopus of Global Control or on Amazon. And Charlie, any other places where people can check out your vast piece of work that you've got, sir?
You can find me on Twitter. Sometimes I'm on there yelling at people, having people yell at me. At MOWEFUS, Moweefus. It's a long story.
That's a story we'll need to get into sometime off air to see if it's suitable for on air.
Yeah, it's totally suitable. It's just a nickname some guy came up with back when we were kids for somebody that was riding the bus and just stuck. One of those.
We had a little super chat come in there, and obviously for people on TFR, you might, what the hell's a super chat? People on YouTube, they can donate, they can support the show. I've turned off the audio so we can't hear what's been said, so it doesn't disrupt us today. But when we get to the break, we'll go to the super chats and we'll certainly thank these people in due course. So, Charlie, let's do battle with the algorithm, shall we?
Let's do it.
It's a story that probably the algorithm doesn't like people talking about, and that's excuse for me and Charlie to talk about it.
Yeah,
so,
enjoy that super chat while you can, because it's going away.
Yeah, I've seen somebody saying they still got an ad when they clicked in. I'm surprised. That's going to go away very soon. But Charlie, talk to me about what's happened, because last time you were on, you absolutely amazed me. You scared me as well, because you know my love of tech, the tech industry. I love geeking out. Never for one moment did I believe or was I aware of the fact that some of the money that was going into some of the very projects that I've spoke about on this show was coming from Jeffrey Epstein, dude. So talk to me about what's happened since we last spoke, your take on everything, and we'll kind of bump heads together. We'll see if we can make sense of it. But folks out there listening, whether you're on TFR or iHeartRadio, TuneIn, YouTube, it's important to stress right now that none of us definitively know what happens. So whatever me and Charlie say here today, it might go against what you personally believe happened. That's okay. We're not technically disagreeing. We're just sharing ideas, Charlie, right?
Yeah, and I feel like, a lot of us have Epstein fatigue, and it's understandable. But it's more than just the sex trafficking. It shows it's giving people, a lot of sort of the general public, their first peek behind the curtain at the fraud and the way that these control systems are operated. You're starting to see, I think it's a really good indicator that nobody believes the official story of Epstein killing himself. Nobody. I don't know anybody that believes it. And the way I see it, there's 3 potential options here. He killed himself, right? He was killed and made it look like he killed himself, or he was swapped out somehow and taken off. Now, normally when people talk about, the level of work and connections required to get somebody to disappear out of a jail that's underground, you would just assume that can't really happen. And I would agree to an extent. But this is one character that could possibly make it happen through his connections, the amount of information, as valuable as he is to some intelligence agency. It's so, my first thought was that it was not him, right? That he was taken out. It was a double. Then they showed those pictures of the ear not matching up and the nose not matching up. And that of course created large problems for people, because you take a look at that. But, we don't know. He's laying down in one, he's standing up in another picture. How does that really affect? How is his nose? Maybe he got punched in the nose by his cellmate the week before. I'm not totally certain about those pictures. And after listening to Sean Atwood, who most of hopefully your viewers know, he's a British guy that did 7 years in a federal prison in Arizona, or no, actually a state prison in Arizona, for ecstasy distribution. He's written several books. He's done a lot of public speaking. He's a fantastic guy. He's had David Icke on recently. He knows how prisons work. He understands how organized crime works. He has friends, two Tonys, these guys that he did time with that were in the mafia. So he has a deep understanding of the mafia control structure. And he made a point, and he changed my mind on this. He said that if you're a guy like Epstein and you're working for intelligence, or you're working for this group of very powerful, dangerous people, if you talked to the feds, it wouldn't make sense for them to pull you out, change your identity, give you plastic surgery, and allow you to sit on an island somewhere safe if you had been talking about these things, because it would send the wrong message to anyone else in that organization that if they got caught and they decided to talk, they would be whisked away, given plastic surgery, and allowed to continue somewhere else. He said it makes more sense that he would be murdered to send the message that if you talk at all, you're dead. And I agree with Sean on that one.
I'm there as well. And you know what? I like how Sean's put it there, because see, if Epstein had been keeping stum and he had just not been speaking to anyone, contrary to what his lawyer is saying, literally he was ready to, speak to the district attorney or whoever it was and name names. The minute he said he was going to name names, and the fact that he let away that he kept a hold of some of this intelligence material, because that's what it was, folks. This guy was an asset. We need to stop thinking of him as the pedophile. We need to stop thinking of him as the financier or the mega millionaire, as they call him now, whatever that means. We need to think of him as a cog in the machine. And the fact that he got burned, that already put his coat on a shaky hook, okay? He was already in bother. But the minute that he was starting to talk about, well, I'll take my day in court, there was even talk of him maybe getting bail at one point as well. This is a guy that wasn't suicidal. He was getting ready to play his wild card. And the fact that he had a wild card, that is not going to be rewarded by this cabal. They're not going to whisk this guy away and give him a new identity and live happily ever after with his handler, Ghislaine Maxwell. It doesn't work like that in the world of espionage, Charlie. It just doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And you don't commit suicide when you're standing trial. You might commit suicide after you've been found guilty and sentenced to 45 years in prison, which is what he was looking at. At that point, that's when you get despondent. That's when you give up hope. That's when you kill yourself. Not when you've still got access to millions of dollars and you've got high-powered attorneys and you've got the possibility of double jeopardy and you've got the ability to control witnesses and shame them and pay them off and make them die and make them disappear and all these things. You still have a bunch of tricks up your sleeve. That's not the time to kill yourself. You kill yourself after you've been sentenced and you've been sent to Florence IDX Supermax and you are getting your food thrown at you through a hole, and you're having to crap into a little hole on the floor, and you realize this is your life forever, no matter what, and nobody's coming to save you. That's when you kill yourself, not when you're sitting in a holding cell waiting to see how things shake out. So we can take the suicide option off the table. It's just not.
Yeah, the lawyer was even talking about going for double jeopardy. He's already been tried for some of this stuff before. So they had strategies that they were working on. This doesn't sound like somebody that had given up to me. And it certainly doesn't sound like somebody who was waiting to get a sweetheart deal out on an island we've never heard about.
No, his option was that, he was going to, if he talked, like we talked about earlier, if you say that you're going to talk, they will get you. They will get you even if you're in prison. In fact, I would argue that it's easier to get you
And
once you're
Charlie,
in
I
prison.
think that's why it's been so obvious that what we're being told isn't true. It's not designed for us. It's not clues left for us to pick over. Although you could look at the fact that they want people to be thrown into that kind of label of conspiracy theorist. But this was more a message to anyone else out there who's a part of this organization, this global network of child sex, child human trafficking, brackets, blackmail operation. And I seen somebody saying he was Mossad, he was CIA. I would say at various times he was probably working for all of them.
Probably both, yeah.
Yep.
Caitlin Johnstone wrote a good article this week that said, now everybody's a conspiracy theorist. And she's right, because this is what it is. This is how you, everybody sees through this. And what I like about this is kind of the same, one of the same things I hoped for with my book, which was that I cover 50 different topics in the book. And I hope that one of those topics appeals to a person, the reader. I hope that they find one that they're like, I'm really interested in this, or this is a topic I didn't know. And then you dig into it, you discover the lies, you discover the cover up, and then you say to yourself, if this is a lie, what else is a lie? And I think about this Epstein case, that a lot of people that are sort of just, going through life in a fog, not paying much attention to it. They see this case because they can't help but see it. It's everywhere. And it does something to their brain. And they think, if this is a lie, if this suicide is a lie, then what else is a lie? What else don't we know? And they start to dig. They start to realize, hey, the media is not telling you the truth. Surprise, like we know that, of course. But for the casual viewer, this might be their first recognition that the media might not be telling them the truth about what's happening.
Do you know what it's like? It could be, you could actually draw parallels between what happened to Epstein and what happened to Lee Harvey Oswald and JFK, because that really woke up the American people to what the CIA was really all about. And I think we've got an opportunity here as well to wake up more people this time because of social media, because of how interconnected we are. And I just hope that we don't end up getting bogged down talking about the patsy, Epstein, because that's what they're trying to turn him into. They want not only Epstein to be dead, but for him to take this story to the grave with him, for the story to be dead, when in reality, he was only a small, small cog in a vast machine.
Yeah, and this machine includes and involves some of the most prominent people on the planet. And of course, the Clintons have been dragged into this, as they should. It didn't take long for it to be politicized that Trump had a connection to him, which he does. But the royal family, knee deep in this guy. Israeli intelligence, he's all over the place. Ehud Barak at his place, Hollywood, media personalities are connected to him. You've got Katie Couric showing up at parties in New York. You've got Katie Couric flying on the Lolita Express. You have, so you're going, wow, there's some interesting names here. Is everybody a pedophile? Not necessarily. No. There's a lot of people that had associations with him because he's a rich person that throws parties and is in this social scene with the rest of these people. And so for him to know other people, it's not a crime, right? It's not necessarily guilt by association. If somebody, Elon Musk is like, yeah, I was introduced to him at a party and he invited me to the island and I passed. Okay, fine. I can deal with that. But I'm not buying Alan Dershowitz's stories about how, I was just there and I got a massage from a 50-year-old Russian lady named Olga. Stop, Alan. Nobody believes you. Thou doth protest too much, methinks. Okay, you're guilty and everybody knows it, and your behavior is just confirming this. I mean, I can't say that I'm sad to see Alan Dershowitz get dragged into this, because I find him to be one of the most reprehensible people on the planet, and I hope he dies in prison. And I think that he's going to find that he does not have the support that he thought he had through the academic community, through the media. I mean, he's a scumbag, and he's getting exposed as such. And you're Epstein's lawyer, and to say, I didn't know any of this stuff was happening, it's just frankly it's insulting to our intelligence.
And look how he's been treated, dude. He's been like had the red carpet rolled out on all of the major kind of network
Mm-hmm.
shows. He's been treated like he's the kind of celebrity in this case. He's one of the bloody accused. But where's the
sure.
Where's the victims in all of this, dude?
Then you have to think, well, if he's one of the accused and he's getting the red carpet treatment at all these major media organizations, why is that? Well, because the media wants to give him the opportunity to spin this story in a way that he sees fit, that takes takes the heat off of the powerful people and puts it on somebody else. So they allow Alan Dershowitz to come on there and talk about this stuff, even though he's he had problems with his first wife too. He had domestic violence issues in the 70s with regard to his first wife, and then he's also written articles trying to push for or to justify lowering the age of consent to 14. I wonder why that is. I wonder why everyone is starting to wonder if Alan Dershowitz is a pedophile. Gee, I can't figure it out. His best friend's a pedophile. He represents a pedophile. He's written articles pushing to lower the age of consent.
Yeah, I retweeted his tweet.
Friends with Woody Allen.
Yeah, I retweeted his tweet when I was like getting ready for the actual Lee Stranahan show, where he was trying to make a case for the age of consent to be lowered to 16. And I'm thinking, what's this guy all about? You know, I mean, here he is accused of things, and now he's operating with almost like impunity, dude. He knows he's untouchable.
Yeah, well, he's probably had to tell his clients to stop talking. So, he should take his own advice. But I actually kind of like that he continues to talk, because the more he talks, the more guilty he makes himself look. And hopefully he'll have his day in court, right? As they say. But how
does that work with Prince Andrew, right? Because, say hell freezes over, you manage to get him into a court. People do realise that in the UK you'd get tried in a crown court, like as in crown royal family court. I don't think we're going to find justice for somebody like him with the way the legal system's set up just now, Charlie.
No, you're not going to get justice. You're not going to get Prince Andrew perp walked out of Buckingham Palace, right? As much as we would love to see that, it's not going to happen. But some of these other players, the FBI, which is a criminal enterprise, does not set my mind at ease. The fact that they're investigating, when William Barr says, I'm devastated that he did this and we're going to launch a full investigation. What that means is that they're going to subvert any real investigation and they're going to bury the evidence, because that's what the FBI does at the highest levels. They don't work to stop crime. They cover it up for their buddies. And everybody knows that the CIA and the Mossad was involved with Epstein, and you better believe that the FBI has knowledge of that as well, and this was allowed to happen. So if you're waiting for Attorney General Barr to get to the bottom of this, you'll be waiting for a very long time, because that guy's a deep state scumbag, and he comes from a family that's also a deep state, filled with deep state scumbag. And that's going to get me to my first point of some of the funnier aspects of Epstein. And I know it's kind of hard to think of anything funny, but people have talked about Attorney General Barr. His dad worked at the Dalton School, and his dad hired Epstein to come in and be a teacher, even though he didn't have a college degree.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't matter about the fact he had no qualifications. Don't worry about
that. Never mind that. Yeah. But the dad, Donald Barr, wrote a book called Space Relations. It's an interplanetary tale of slave trades where children are taken to intergalactic space trading colonies where they're raped and traded on the open market.
So now I know where Robert David Steele got that lunatic story that got him kicked off of Alex Jones, because he was on Alex Jones talking about the sex camps that were up on Mars and places like this. Sounds to me like he's been a big fan of Mr. Barr's book here.
Yeah. Why? I mean, it's a strange. Now, listen, I'm somebody that's written a book too, but I didn't write a book about intergalactic slave trades and then hired a guy that created one of the largest domestic slave trades around. People say, well, there's no connection between the two of them. Maybe there is no connection between the two of them, but how many people have written books about this sort of stuff and then hired a guy who has no qualifications to teach children? There's something strange about this. I mean, the fact that the principal of the Dalton School is writing books about underage sex trafficking should be automatic disqualification to hold a position at a school.
And this Dalton School, Charlie, for people outside of the US, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is like the elite of the elite within Manhattan, right?
Yeah. It's a private school inside Manhattan, very expensive, very high barriers for entry, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe you just need a lot of money. Clearly the barriers for hiring their teachers weren't very high if they hired Jeffrey Epstein to be there in some capacity. I don't know if he was actually a full-blown teacher, or if he was just a tutor, but whatever his capacity was, he had no business being there and didn't last.
He was teaching audio and visual, like recording. What? Just saying, dude. I'm just trying to figure out what this guy was up to, I have no idea either. But yeah, that book, when you sent me that, I mean, talk about taking it back. It's just so out of place. Like you say, somebody who runs a school and he's writing about kids being trafficked across the solar system for sex slavery. It's almost as if he's like talking about what's going on in the real world, but set it in a fictional scenario.
Well, it's funny you say that, because a lot of times the people in Hollywood have said that the best way to tell the true story is to hide it in fiction, right? So they'll write a script for a fictional movie and it'll sound really outrageous, but the people that are on the inside that know the details know that's not fiction. That's a real thing.
It's the revelation. Yeah, it's the revelation of the method, as they call it. Yeah.
The revelation of the method. Mark Devlin has done a great job going into that in his Musical Truths, Volume 1 and 2. That's a good
and Mark
point.
will be coming back on by the end of the year, folks. I was exchanging Facebook messages with him. Can't wait to speak to him again. But Charlie, what else?
His first fictional book too, which ought to be good.
What else have you got here, man? Because I know we've got a pile of pictures that you're going to talk about as well. But take us where you need to go, man.
Sure. Well, there's Epstein had an ambulance on his island. Let's just think about that for 1 second here. An ambulance on an island. Where are you going with your ambulance on your island? It even has the abbreviations LSJ, Little St. James Ambulance. It's an unlicensed ambulance, apparently. It doesn't have the markings on the roof, doesn't have the numbers on the roof. So that's just, I mean, this is one of those things where it doesn't necessarily mean anything devious is going on. It's just a strange little tidbit.
It's pretty damned weird all the same, dude.
It's weird. And I think that, look, for all we know, there could be some requirement by the Secret Service that anywhere Bill Clinton goes, there has to be an ambulance. I'm being serious. I mean, maybe that's a requirement that we don't know about. But considering he ditched his Secret Service detail on at least 6 different occasions to come to the island, I don't know how much he really cares about their rules and regulations. But that's the only thing I can think of that would make any sense. So there's an ambulance there. There's also a lot of indications that he's got something buried under that island, right under the temple. There's ventilation shafts. There's power generation facilities all around there that don't really correlate with any structures that are near it, so indicating that there might be something underground. We know that he's excavated on the island. We know that he's filed permits for Great St. James, which is the big island that's under construction nearby.
And I mean, locals knew what this place was, right? They called it Pedo Island.
For sure, they knew what it was. In fact, Great St. James is, like I said, the bigger island that he bought a couple years ago and was currently permitting and retrofitting illegally retrofitting because his permits weren't coming through and he was still digging anyway. There's a boat that's docked near that is always there, and it's a little mobile restaurant. And the Disney Cruise Line that parks in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, right next to it, has off-boat excursions that people can take. And one of them is to go snorkeling over at Great St. James, this new island where you can get pizza for lunch from the little boat that sells pizza, of all things, next to the pedophile island. So
that'll spark 1,000 conspiracies. That fact alone, Charlie, you've set people's imaginations on fire, dude.
And it may just be that there's pizza there.
Exactly.
That could be it. That could be all there is to it. Hey, you're going snorkeling and you want to get some pizza, but it's funny the way they advertise it as, the pizza boat and everything like that.
Somebody in the chat room was saying he's got a dental office on the island as well. Nothing would surprise me with this dude.
Yeah, he's got a full dental setup with the dental chair and everything. People have speculated that was to wire up microphones inside these girls' teeth, straight KGB style, so that they
I'd never actually thought of that, because there was one story from Virginia Roberts talking about how she was told to bring back information of her her meetings with Andrew, etc. We'll be back after these short messages. Don't go anywhere. Charlie Robinson knocking it out of the park. We'll be right back. There we go, Charlie. We are here. We're still live on the YouTubes now. I want to come down here. I want to thank somebody. It was somebody called AI, or maybe Al, and they were saying, you may not play guitar, but here's a coin. Thank you very, very much for that. AI, Al, Hal, whoever you are. I hope you're all enjoying this out there today. Seen people talking about keywords and things in the chat room. Folks, you need to be really careful with that, because there's a whole lot of misinformation and disinformation that has sprung up around that Italian food source that features bread and lots of lovely toppings. And some of it could be absolutely just what people suspect it is. But like Charlie said, sometimes pizza's just pizza.
Sometimes it is. I mean, I wouldn't go to Tony Podesta's house for it.
No, probably not. No, it's not a dinner party that would be high on my list, Charlie. Don't think so. Nope.
No. But
no, definitely not.
We look, some of this stuff we are speculating about, and that's okay. We're not pretending to have all the answers, and we're just kind of talking it through. But this is how you get ideas sort of cooking. You drag it out, you talk about it, you see if anything makes sense. Some of it will, some of it won't. But we're working on this. I think one thing that we can all agree on is that Epstein was up to no good, right? And he was protected by some very powerful people. The information that he was gathering is a currency. It has value. It has more value than gold. He is just
the American arm of the operation that is very similar to what Jimmy Savile was to the establishment over here. And the connections, they're not hard to look for. You had Jimmy Savile, and I was sharing videos with you after the last show. Remember, Two Little Boys and all the creepy stuff him and Rolf Harris were up to. But I mean, you don't have to look far for his association and his links to the royal family, in particular Prince Charles and Prince Philip. But then you go to Epstein, and he's got this close thing going on with Andrew. So, I mean, the royal family, they're up to their assholes in this, dude.
And who's the common thread? It's Ghislaine Maxwell, right? It's the Maxwell family. That's the common thread that's multi-generational here, right? So he early on was more UK centered, right? So he has his the Mirror. Was it the Mirror or was it Telegram?
Mirror Group.
Yeah,
he was basically like the Rupert Murdoch of his time.
Right. Yeah. Before he looted their pension funds, stole all their money. So he was running. He was involved with blackmail operations as well. With the UK, he was involved and friends with the people that were running them, Saviles and guys like that, high-ranking politicians in the UK. And his daughter, Ghislaine, brought those connections with her. They took Epstein's money wherever he got it. blended it with her connections to royalty, and they really had something. So like we talked about in the last episode, the Maxwell family is in the spy business. That's what they do. They have all these other businesses going on, but at their core, they're about getting information, compromising information on people, and using that however they want, whether it's traditional intelligence espionage or whether it's corporate espionage as well. I mean, that information would be sold to the highest bidder.
And when we come back as well, I mean, I'm going to mention that, just being on the Lolita Express does not mean you're guilty of some of the most evil crimes that we're talking about here. Just being at these parties, maybe taking part in drugs, something like that. Maybe that was as much as somebody done, but that would be enough to hold over them. We're going to bring back the network now. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. We are back. We are live. Final segment with my good friend, researcher, author, Charlie Robinson. I really love hanging out with you, Charlie. We're like brothers from another mother, and we seem to be on the same page most of the time. And we're talking about Epstein. We're going to get back into some of the stuff you've been looking into. But I want to really kind of put this point out there for anyone listening. I personally am not going to assign guilt to anyone just through association. And what I mean by that is, for me, yes, it's very telling when you see a name turning up on the manifest for the Lolita Express going to the island. But that in itself, folks, that's not enough to cast somebody, in the light that some of the more heinous, evil crimes that we're talking about here. There is due process. There is a justice system. I know sometimes it's just them and just us. But at the same time, we can't go about just willy-nilly accusing people, Charlie, of some of the more evil, sadistic things that some of the victims, and we're talking about the victim statements here, that they have claimed has been going on. Now, some of these people are involved in that, but not all of them, right?
Right. Yeah, just because you went on the Lolita Express doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like I said, Katie Couric has been on it, right? From Today Show, who's universally loved by people. For all I know, she went down there because she got a free trip to a Caribbean island, and it's a great place to have cocktails and relax and, go to the beach and all that stuff. Could be completely innocent. And it could be that that's one party where nothing bad happened, but there were probably some parties where some bad things happened. And maybe it's about knowing your guests and knowing who you've got. Maybe it doesn't happen in front of everyone. There's a Dr. Dave Janda who does a really great podcast show. And he talked about when he first went into politics, his first and only time, I guess, in the 80s, when he went to Washington, D.C., he was told, if you go to the parties, leave before the after party starts, right? So you could be at a party with these guys and not be in on it, right? And not be a part of it. But the after party is where the problem happens.
Yeah, I've had a guest on before that was in and around the Hollywood music kind of scene. Exactly what they said on the show. So start of the night, start the party, brilliant. And then you get asked, do you come into the after party? And you go to the after party, but then you kind of get the nod and the wink as if to come into the real party. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, the guy from the Scorpions was on TMZ talking about that too. He made a comment that he went to the after party one time, and what he saw there was no bueno, man. He said it was dark. There was some bad stuff going on there. You can find that video of it. It's like the guy was leaving a bar and they asked him a bunch of questions. He was pretty candid about it. He looked pretty shook up to just telling that story from something that had happened years ago. But we talked about, some of the more unusual aspects attached to this Epstein thing. And we've got reports that in his house in the New York, the place on 77th Street, he had a mannequin in a wedding dress hanging from the ceiling. I mean, that to me is sort of reminiscent of the Tony Podesta artwork.
That's disturbing. Yeah, that's disturbing. Mannequins disturb me anyway.
Yeah. Just anything having to do with mannequins automatically is creepy. But you put them in a wedding dress and hang them from the ceiling like it's art. That's beyond anything. I'm no art critic, but that's weird.
Yeah.
He had a human-sized chess board set up with all of the chess pieces were modeled after his employees, which is really
Bizarre.
creepy and weird. He had the medical examiner's office that did Epstein's autopsy has been busted harvesting organs and body parts.
I did not know that.
Yeah, the guy that did his autopsy was the same guy that has ties to Kennedy. And
now I've got a theory on that. Right? Because the defense, Epstein's team, they were allowed to bring in an outside coroner to observe and witness this whole autopsy. Now, you're talking about Michael Baden, who was the guy who put the magic bullet back into play with Kennedy. He was also part of the O.J. Simpson trial. And the way I think about this, and it's just an idea, but if I'm Epstein's team and I'm wanting to make sure there's no shenanigans going on in that autopsy, they went to the guy who basically wrote the playbook.
Right.
So, it would have been harder for them to cover anything up in the autopsy because there he is working for the Epstein defense team. And perhaps, maybe that's why we had a bit of time before the decision came out. We had this broken bone had turned up. I wonder if we would ever have heard about the broken bone, Charlie, if that dude hadn't been there.
I don't know. He strikes me as being a bit of a fixer,
He's the guy but he would be the guy
in.
you go to, right? If you were trying to make sure there was no shenanigans as well. And think about the money they could have thrown at him. It's like a bottomless pit of money, the Epstein estate. So, I don't know. There's two ways of looking at that, right?
Yeah, he's on the record saying that he was, for the OJ trial, he was paid $1,500 77 different times. So he made about $100,000 off of that. So this is a guy that's never found he's never met a courtroom he didn't like. He wants to be involved in it, and he strikes me as being a bit of a fixer. We also did you know that Epstein won the lottery?
Right, dude. This really blew me away when you informed me. I had no idea about this. And I've got one of the stories here. Yeah, I'll bring this up and I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, so one day after starting his 18-month prison sentence, he won the lottery. So the way a lot of the lottery systems are in the United States, sometimes it's just state by state. Sometimes there's multiple states connected, and it becomes part of like a bigger network. So he won the lottery he won the Oklahoma Powerball payout of $41.3 million. And it was paid to Zorro Trust, right? So Zorro Trust is the one who collected the ticket one day after he started serving his time, which is really weird. There's a connection to Bill Richardson in New Mexico as well. Bill Richardson has connections to this Oklahoma Lotto board somehow. I'd have to get a little bit more into that. But the drawing, which is normally televised, wasn't televised due to a technical glitch. Isn't it funny how there's always a technical glitch when it comes to these video cameras showing things, right? Like
crazy,
when they don't want you to see them.
Usually they don't ever fail. I mean, usually these things never fail, right? They're always on. Everything works hunky-dory. Okay. Yeah, it's almost like on the morning of that September in 2001 where like the laws of physics are defied and things,
Yeah, you get 3 frames from the Pentagon, the most surveilled building in the world. You get a couple frames of alleged Mohammed Atta going through the security line and everything. That's all you got. You got 1 million cameras everywhere. You get fuzzy. You get better pictures sent back from Mars than you get from any of these surveillance cameras that happen to be covering in something that they don't want you to see. So. That's just a little interesting thing. And then of course we've got the Bill Clinton painting in Epstein's house. Now this is a bit of a fun one because the immediate assumption is to say that he's wearing the Monica Lewinsky blue dress.
That's
but
where
that
I
is
went.
not.
Yep.
That's where I went to.
Yep. That's exactly where I went, dude.
You would go.
Yep.
That is not the case, actually. This is the dress that Hillary Clinton was wearing at the 2009 Kennedy Center Gala. So it's not that Monica dress. You can find pictures of there you go, of her wearing it then. So, so she's at a Kennedy event. If you look at there's one book on the bookshelf that you can tell what it is, and it's about Kennedy. So it's a picture of Kennedy. So there's a Kennedy connection. There's sort of a Kennedy undertone to this painting. And then the last thing, so you obviously you and I are both big fans of Ryan Gable, and he's great with symbols and symbolism and what these different things mean. The red shoes are very well known in the pedophile world as being a symbol of pedophilia. I know there's red shoes, right? You can get red shoes at Foot Locker or wherever. You can get red basketball shoes. I'm not trying to say, but when you got Tony Podesta and all his buddies in this picture, and then all the paintings that he's got around him, and everybody has red shoes on, let me tell you, there is a connection between red shoes and pedophilia. That's a fact. There is. So the fact that Bill is wearing it. I don't want to misgender.
Oh, God forbid we do something
Bill.
like that. Yeah, exactly, man. We might offend people out there, Charlie, you know?
I know. Well, the red shoes, I suspect, are red for a reason. They could have been any color shoes, right? They could have been blue. They could have been black. They could have been cream colored. They could have been. They're red. They're red because, that is part of this symbolism. And clearly Bill's been in Jeff Epstein's house in New York, right? The Clintons are in New York. Jeff's in New York. They had some interaction. By all accounts, this painting was kind of looked at as kind of a funny, everybody got a good laugh out of it. So it was painted by a lady named Patrina Ryan Cleed, and she does for her master's thesis in 2012 at New York Academy of Art. I don't think it's going to come as much of a surprise that Epstein donated large sums of money to the New York Academy of Art, which is probably how he came about getting this picture. Now, the artist claims that she didn't sell it to Epstein. It went up for a charity auction, and she didn't know that it wound up in his house. And I have no reason to believe that she's not telling the truth about that. But, Jeffrey just had to have that. And I find that to be sort of a delightful picture of Bill. There's also a second picture, which I didn't send over, of that the same artist painted of George W. Bush sitting cross-legged on the floor behind his desk that looks to be like maybe the Oval Office, with two paper airplanes and a bunch of blocks that are knocked over. So it looks like he had kind of like with large Jenga blocks built two towers and then crashed airplanes into it. So that's a bit of sort of a weird symbolism. Now it could be made out to be that this is like two paintings sort of indicting these psychopaths for what they're really up to, sort of showing in plain sight.
Is that not representing the Oval Office as well? You've got the kind of the carpet with the stars and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which made, I think, most people legitimately was Monica Lewinsky, which I think is a fair assumption to make. In this particular case, it just happens to not be Monica's dress. It might still have some sort of connection to the Oval Office. I mean, that's the only story we know. That's the only story that the public knows about what went down in the Oval Office. I'd be willing to bet Jeff Epstein knows a lot more stories about what really happened in that room, considering he also is on the record of visiting Bill at the White House before. So any sort of statement that the Clintons have put out trying to distance themselves from Jeffrey Epstein, they can go ahead and save themselves the trouble. Bill Clinton is a compulsive liar. Everybody knows that. He has a hard time, an impossible time telling the truth. He's a bad guy. He's one of the worst people in the world. He's one of the worst people in the world. I will say that again. He's not running child trafficking operations that I know of out of his Chappaqua house. But the Clinton Foundation is the largest operating charity fraud in the history of the planet. And Charles Ortel and Jason Goodman at Crowdsource the Truth have done over 140 episodes strictly focusing on the fraud of the Clinton Foundation. So the guy's a bad guy, and he's never met a crime he wasn't interested in, whether it was cocaine trafficking coming through Arkansas, whether it was the Clinton suicide list, which is a real thing, no matter how dismissive the corporate media wants to be about that. He locked up more black people than anyone through his omnibus crime bill. He's a reprehensible human being, and he's also a pedophile. People have known that. He's also, you can ask Juanita Broderick if he's a rapist as well. She'll tell you that he is.
Absolutely. And of course, Charlie's Skype has started to glitch now. Imagine my surprise that Charlie's... Yeah, surprise, we get this far, we start talking about the creepy Clintons, and now we start getting a bit of glitchiness, Charlie. What's going on there, man?
I am not suicidal.
No, definitely not. Same here as well, folks. I've got plans way, way, way into the future. I'm certainly not planning spending a night in the MCC anytime soon, that's for sure.
No. So back on to Epstein. There is one more thing that I think is sort of interesting. That a guy that's sitting in the MCC prison, right, waiting to go to trial on trafficking, has a young woman that comes and visits him in jail, and apparently they are in the room that is off limits. You know, it's the room where you go in to have some privacy with your attorney. That this young woman went in there with Epstein and spent 2 hours with him just a couple days before he died. I should say before he was murdered.
So that's like you could say that's really like some kind of conjugal kind of visit, you would imagine. And see, this is the thing, folks, because when you've got money like Epstein, and I heard Sean Atwood talking about this as well, 45 years in jail, yeah, it's a long time, but it's not going to be the same as 45 years in jail for somebody like me and Charlie. Because when you've got vast wealth like Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, you're basically going to be running that prison if you grease the right pockets, right? Yeah,
I mean, the people have talked about mob bosses being in that same jail facility and still getting, dinners from Peter Luger steakhouse in Brooklyn being brought to him. So this if you've got enough money, you've got connection, you've got access to things in the outside world. And I would say that even though those mob bosses had quite a bit of money, they might not have had the sort of money that Epstein had or has. Or doesn't have. Who knows? We don't really know.
Exactly.
We don't really know.
He's went from being billionaire financier, although we can't find anything he truly financed, and now he's gone to mega millionaire. And really, in reality, we should be calling him a sex offender, because that's the one thing he has been found guilty of. And I wish people would stop describing him as the financier and things like that, the billionaire.
I do too.
The guy's a pervert. He's a criminal. He's one of the most evil characters to walk the face of this earth.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about, what a reprehensible person Alan Dershowitz is, and if you look back on that 2008 prosecution, one of the things that they did was they made it so that he pled guilty to a solicitation of prostitution charge. And what that does is that is a calculated move, because what it means is that all of those girls are technically prostitutes, even though they're not. They're underage. You can't be an underage prostitute. You're not at the age of consent. So it's child trafficking, right? It's sex with minors. It's not prostitution. You can't be a prostitute technically unless you're 18 years or older. You have Charlie, to have the ability to consent.
I had somebody, a vile individual, trying to challenge me on the fact that Prince Andrew was in a London flat at the time he was pictured with Victoria Guthrie, whatever her name is, and she was 17 at the time. I said, that's all very well, but you're forgetting the fact that she was forced to be there. She didn't want to be there. She was basically a slave. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
the age thing, this whole law, but she was over the age in UK at 16. I'm sorry, but that doesn't really kind of float as a defense for me at all.
No,
Not at all, dude.
It doesn't. This is that's some sort of weird. That's some weird logic. Of course, some of these girls turned 18 while they were working for Epstein, whether they were out, he sort of had like a bit of a pyramid scheme or multi-level marketing, right? Where you've got one who's out getting girls, and then they get another girl, and that girl is in charge of getting more girls herself, and she might have been pimped out, but then she might also be a someone that's a finder that goes out and accumulates other girls. Some of these girls were 16 years old when they started working, and then they became 18 years old and they were still working. So at that point they're technically legal, but it doesn't excuse the fact that they were illegal those years preceding that. So that sort of logic doesn't, like you said, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work for me. I do worry about people trying to find a get out clause for Jeff Epstein and the kind of stuff he's been up to. There aren't any get out clauses available for him. It's just this is but I will say this one. I don't want to call it a nice thing, but one thing to come out of this is that I think the average person that's watching their news now has a darker realization of what is actually going on out there, that these things exist. These things have existed for a very long time. Roy Cohn was running these blackmail operations. And for people that hear that name, they're not really quite sure who that was. Roy Cohn was a sick degenerate attorney in New York City. He's Donald Trump's mentor. Okay, so we goof on all these politicians, right? We don't like any of them. And for those of you that are looking for a reason to not like Donald Trump, check out Roy Cohn and find out who he is. He was a very influential attorney for Donald Trump. He's the one that taught him to sue everybody. Don't never admit defeat. Always announce victory, even if it's in the face of obvious defeat. Announce that you won, you were victorious. Say that everything is the best. I mean, he basically shaped this guy's personality. But he also did that with Roger Stone as well. Roy Cohn and Roger Stone were very, very close. Roger Stone has ties to the NXIVM cult. He's on the payroll of NXIVM. Roger Stone's on the payroll of InfoWars. Okay. Roger Stone is involved in child sex trafficking in the way that through his connections to NXIVM. He was involved with Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn was involved with Savile. Epstein was involved with all of these people. It's not an accident. These blackmail operations have been running for a very, very long time. We talk about the FBI back in the day being started by, Hoover was, running, when he was running the FBI, he was a cross-dressing maniac. I was going to say maybe that
files on everybody else.
I was going to say maybe that was Hoover's old dress that Bill had on. Who knows? At this point, Charlie, anything's in play, man.
Well, one more thing that we found that will come as a surprise to nobody is that Epstein ordered women's panties while he was in prison as well, or jail as well. So, I guess as you ever see that movie Blow?
Story.
Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
He's going across the border and he opens up the suitcase and looks in. There's nothing but some women's underwear, and he just says, "Old habits die hard." Maybe Epstein just old habits. Just had to have some women's underwear.
What the hell are we talking about? This is insane, dude. But this is how these elite people roll. And that's why, as dark as this topic is, we really do have an opportunity right now. We really do, because we can open the eyes of people as to how the world really works, how the mainstream media are controlled by these very same people and organizations as well. And this is the dark underbelly of the octopus of global control. It's how business gets done when you get to that higher echelons of power. They've all got dirt on one another. And you can even look at likes of Skull and Bones, where, you've got all these young dudes, part of that secret society, and they're lying naked in coffins, and they're doing this, that, and the other. And basically, they've all got blackmail material on each other. They're getting used to the game, Charlie.
For sure. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. They are also granted $250,000 when they leave Skull and Bones, so that they can get started on their own projects, their own work. So they're in a position where, that's exactly what they're doing. They're getting them groomed and ready for how this whole thing works. See, everybody knows that you were in this coffin doing this weird thing. We've got the goods on you. You've got the goods on all your brothers that you saw doing this. If one of us goes down, we all go down. Therefore, we stay connected. Nobody talks. We keep it all in-house. We settle our differences our own way. We don't get the police involved. But if we do get the police involved, make sure we get the right police chief involved, somebody that has ties, somebody that we can control.
And you don't need the full Justice Department. You just need a few useful idiots in the right place to turn their backs, to switch the cameras off. And we're not talking about the entire legal system being corrupt. A lot of it is, yes, but you only need that few bad actors who probably have got dirt on them. And that's why they're, doing what they've been told to do. But Charlie, we're almost out of time. For everyone out there, we've got Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew coming up right after the break, right here on TFRlive.com. Charlie, let people know where they can keep up to date with everything to do with the Octopus of Global Control.
You can go to my website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. You can email me. Yeah, I chat with people all the time. You can buy my book there. You can buy the digital version of it. If you want the paperback, you can find that on Amazon or on barnesandnoble.com. You can also see on YouTube through RT UK my interview on Renegade Inc. Check that out.
That's us, folks. We'll be back tomorrow. Wherever you are, make it TFR. There we go, Charlie. We're still on YouTube just now, so we'll say our fond farewells to the YouTube audience. We'll see what people are saying in there. I see Kristen and Nancy, and we've got Nana in there as well. I've set up a bit of a matriarchy in the chat room with the mods.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I've got the toxic beard thing. I've got the toxic beard thing going on. So if I then nobody can accuse me of being a total sexist ass, right? I know I'm toxically male and I've got that whole thing going on. But I'm not that bad, dude. I try not to misgender. I try to call people they, it, whatever they label themselves. We do our best, Charlie, in this world of idiocracy.
Yes, we do. We do. And from time to time, we will misgender somebody. And you know what? That's okay. Because that stuff's ridiculous.
Absolutely. I'm just kicking somebody out of the chat room just now. That's it.
Did they make fun of my bald head?
No, it's okay. I just don't see why people, anytime you have a conversation, it always ends up going back to Jews and things like that. I don't get it, dude. I mean, we didn't mention that word once on the show, and yet, I don't know. I don't get it. I think we've got far bigger problems in the world than people that practice Judaism. We've got people that hide behind that, calling themselves Zionists and things. Maybe they're a big part of the problem. But, if we're going to, in this world, Charlie, it's important that we define groups by their right labels, right? We wouldn't want to offend anyone unnecessarily.
Well, Joe Biden will tell you, you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist, so it's not the Jewish part that
exactly.
People, I think there's a lot of people that are like, the Jews are running this. It's not that. The Zionists are
I
really
listened to
causing problems for people.
I listened to somebody it was Rabbi Shapiro the other day, and he was on with Lee Stranahan over on Fault Lines. And this is a dude, and he was explaining the difference between Judaism and Zionism. And for anyone out there who might not really have it well defined, the differences between the two, go and check that out. You can find it on Periscope. And just check for Lee Stranahan, and you'll find it on there. One of the most riveting conversations I've heard in a long time. And I learned a lot from it, Charlie. I'd say
just check out Lee Stranahan in general.
Yeah,
his stuff is fantastic. He's in it, man. He's a legit guy, and he's.
I worry about him, dude. I worry that someday, I go to get him on the show or something, and the brakes have gone in the car, something like that. But he did assure me, like you assured me, none of us here are suicidal. you know.
No.
But
No,
we're out
no.
of time, dude, and I'll kind of wrap up. I'll let the audience get back about their day. And I might be back on the simulcast tomorrow. I'll definitely be on TFR. We'll see how things go. Want to thank everyone that tuned in today here on YouTube. I was so nervous about doing simulcasts. I always have been. But I tell you what, I had nothing to worry about because the chat room here, chat room over at TFR, you're all brilliant people who have got your minds open. And it's not to the point where your brains fall out. And I learn just as much from keeping an eye on the chat as I do listening to people like Charlie Robinson. And it works vice versa. So I hope myself, and in particular Charlie, we've given you something to think about tonight. I hope we've challenged some of your kind of beliefs or maybe your theories you've been putting together about any of the subjects we've been talking about. Because it's only when you're challenged by opposing viewpoints and by alternative theories out there that you really start to learn. And that's what it's all about, Charlie, because like I say, none of us know, and we're just here to learn.
Yeah. And if we all put our heads together, we ought to be able to get to the bottom of some of this nonsense that's happening in our world. And it's our responsibility to do so. It's our responsibility to stand up and say, we're not tolerating this anymore. We're done with this. You're going to sell us these lies. We're not going to believe them. Just because you put it on, just because you're wearing a suit and you're on the nightly news and you're talking does not mean that what you're saying is the truth. And we are going to call you out for it. We're going to hold you accountable. We're going to educate our friends and our families. And that's not being disrespectful. That's being respectful to ourselves. It's being respectful to the truth. And that's where everything should come from. I don't care if I'm right or you're right, Kev, just as long as collectively we get it right and we do the right thing. Check your ego at the door, man. Let's just make sure that what we're saying is as accurate as possible, and we hold those people to account, the ones that are trying to deceive us and misdirect us and things like that. I love that about Lee Stranahan, that he is on Cernovich like crazy, and he won't let him continue to push this lie that he was suing, Epstein, that he was actually suing the victim. I love that he's on top of that. In our own little way, we have to hold these people accountable however we can. It's all about getting this information. It's going to become life or death at some point. I hate to go Alex Jones and sound overly dramatic, but I mean, we just talked for an hour about what's happening in China and that is coming our way. So we got to make sure that things like that, we don't allow them to happen. It's once it's in place, it's too late. Let's stand up in advance. Let's educate our friends. Let's educate our families. Take this video, share it. God knows YouTube isn't gonna promote it anywhere. No. And if you have the financial ability to donate to Super Chats, so this helps Kev keep his operation going. Nobody's getting rich doing this. Everybody's doing other things. I mean, if you've got a couple bucks and you feel inclined, everybody in this alternative media world would be greatly appreciative of that, myself included. If you buy my book, I appreciate it. I email you right back. I say hi. I say share it. I tell people to take my book and share it with friends and family. I don't care. I don't get any money from that. I want the information out there. Please wake up, everybody. It starts with you. It spreads to your friends. It spreads to your family, and everybody makes a difference.
Absolutely, dude. And I've seen somebody in the chat room, got Kristen saying, I'm sure Kev will have this on YouTube soon. This will be on YouTube as soon as I click finish. It's all no messing about for me now. It just goes straight to YouTube. Monetized won't be there right enough, but the video will be there. The algorithm, it probably won't promote it. In fact, it definitely won't promote it, but it will be there on my channel. I also urge you all, check out the last show I done with Charlie, because some of the connections and the research, and he backed it all up, where Epstein, why he's so influential, the people that he's connected to. I really urge people to watch that. And I also urge people to go and check out the episode of Charlie on the Renegade on Russia Today, because that gentleman on there, I thought that was a brilliant conversation the two of you had, Charlie.
He's great. Ross Ashcroft is the host of Renegade Inc. on RT. And he also was the writer, director, and producer of a great documentary called Four Horsemen. You can check that out. It came out in 2012. It's about the financial crash. He does a great job. You won't see him in there, but he's behind the scenes. But he's got guys like John Perkins and Lieutenant Colonel Wilkerson and really interesting people that Noam Chomsky, talking about how these sort of market crashes are invented, how they're put together, how they collapse the market. And so his Renegade show really kind of focuses on some financial aspects of it. So we had a great conversation. It was fun to it was nice to meet him in person. It was cool to go to his studio in London, and I think people will like it. And he and I have been emailing back and forth afterwards. He's like, wow, I've gotten a lot of good things coming. I heard a lot of good comments from the episode, so hopefully people will like it.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I've done umpteen shows with you, and I still sat there engrossed, dude. I loved it, and the fact that you were talking about how John Perkins' book, we've mentioned it before, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I was kind of smiling because you were talking about going scuba diving, and it was that good a book that even when you were scuba diving, you were thinking, I need to get back up and read the next chapter.
Yeah. And that's a totally true story.
Charlie, listen, man. Here's the compliment I want to pay you, because for as good as that book is by John Perkins, historic piece of work. Now, your book's exactly the same, because once you learn what some people have been saying, you want to know how deep that rabbit hole goes, and you want to learn more about just who is attached to the tentacles of the octopus of global control. So from myself and Charlie Robinson, I want to bid you all farewell. I'll be back tomorrow. Charlie will be back next month. We are out of here.